Just a little bit.
Huh?
Yeah.
Oh, gee.
Okay, today is June 27th.
Yep.
1986.
That's right.
And this is Joe Todd and an interview with Mrs. Hackmuth. And what is your first name?
Margaret.
Margaret Hackmuth.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess Bartlesville, Oklahoma?
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Hackmuth,
Hmm.
where were you born?
Pierson, Michigan.
And when's your birthday?
December 15th, 1904.
December 15th, 1904.
Mm-hmm.
And who is your father?
Well, my natural father was F.H. Peck.
And your mother?
Laverne Fullington.
Fullington?
Mm-hmm.
Where are your parents from?
They were, well, Michigan, but then they originally from Canada.
Both of them from Canada?
I don't know much about them
Yeah.
because I know that my mother's ancestors were from Canada and England.
Now, the photograph you showed me of your grandfather, now what was his name?
Fullington, George Fullington.
George Fullington. And he was in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Tell me about him.
Oh, he was a remarkable man. The picture, I told you, was when he was 18. And it was taken the day that he and his wife were married, my grandmother. And I say they were married in the morning. He left for the Civil War in the afternoon and didn't get back for 4 years. And he had adventures. I used to sit and just goggle-eyed listening to the stories he told about what happened to him. He was in one of the terrible prisons, that the southern prisons.
Was he at Andersonville?
Andersonville, And in fact, he escaped, and by a ruse, And he told me all this, where he was shot, and he was shot 7 times, and all this. And of course, to me, it was quite adventurous.
What unit was he a member of?
7th Michigan Cavalry.
What battles was he in?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah.
Because I was quite
Okay.
young.
Did he tell you where he was captured?
No, he didn't. As I remember, he didn't mention their names. If he did, I didn't.
And would you describe the stories he told you about Andersonville? What life was like in Andersonville?
It was horrible. He said it was dreadful. Of course, to me, it was horrifying. And but then he was an adventurous young man, and I'm sure he embellished the stories to impress me.
What was life like in the prison camp? What did they do? The food, the activities?
Well, they had no food practically. You can imagine there were a lot of prisoners, and at that time they certainly didn't have. They couldn't furnish food. They starved. I'm sure a lot of them did starve to death, and a good many of them were wounded, and they had no medical care.
Where did he stay in the camp? What type
I
of?
don't know. I don't know.
And you say he escaped.
As he's told, he said he did. And but he told me stories about his partner that rode with him. Said one night, he says, "I'm going to get it tomorrow. I know, I feel that I'm going to get it." So my grandfather said, "You ride behind me on my horse, and then if they get you, they'll get me." And actually, the bullet did go between his arm and his body and hit his partner, killed him. But he told me all kinds of stories like that.
Remember any other stories he told that?
I can't think of them
Okay.
right off. It's,
Um,
after all, you have to remember this was a long
Right.
time ago. I'm remembering something 75 years ago.
how did he escape from Andersonville?
I don't know how he did. Oh, he said something about going out with the guard and telling the guard some story and having him look up at something, and he had him escape that way. Now, I don't know whether that's true or
Yeah.
not, because he was,
Then did he get back north then?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
eventually,
Mhm.
4 years.
What kind of work did your father do?
My father was, owned a car sales
Mm-hmm.
thing. But I have to tell you that we were abandoned children, my brother and I. And I was adopted by an aunt and uncle when I was very young.
Mm-hmm.
So what I knew about my natural parents was very little.
What was your aunt and uncle's names?
May and Jack Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Are they also from same
Yeah.
town, Michigan?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What kind of work did your uncle do?
He was, well, we had a farm,
Okay.
a truck farm,
Mhm.
and then he was state game warden for many years in Michigan.
As a small girl, what chores did you do around the
Oh
farm?
goodness, I did everything. I rode the horse when we cultivated corn, and I weeded carrots. We had a truck garden, and the rows, I remember, were 777 feet long. I measured them. And, you get down on your knees and weed, get down to the end, you turn around, you've got 777 feet to go back.
How long would it take to weed one row?
I don't know, it seemed forever.
What crops did you raise in the truck farm?
Well, there was a sauerkraut factory there,
Mhm.
so we raised cabbage, and then we raised carrots, and we'd go to the wholesale market, 2 o'clock in the morning, with the horse and wagon, and sell the stuff. But we raised tomatoes for the canning factory, and cabbage for the sauerkraut factory, and cucumbers for the pickle factory.
Now, were they all in the town there?
They're near.
Yeah.
They were near.
And what was the name of the town again?
Well, actually, it's Comstock Park. It was right out
Yeah.
5 miles from Grand Rapids.
Mm-hmm.
And Henry Hackmuth, my father-in-law, eventually had the sauerkraut factory. And if it wasn't Hackmuth sauerkraut, it wasn't good in Michigan.
Yeah.
He was the sauerkraut king of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And we raised cabbage that at my small size, I couldn't get my arms around them. They were huge. I can remember one time our hired man got drunk. And right at the time when we were supposed to cut cabbage.
Mm-hmm.
And it froze that night and split the cabbages. And he came home and fell down in the yard. I can remember my aunt saying, the dogs were lined up licking his face, and he said, I don't care if they lick his face off. Oh, she was so mad. He was.
Where'd you start school?
When I was 5.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And what was the name of the school?
It was Comstock Park.
Comstock Park.
Mhm.
How many students were there?
Let's see. I think when I got out of the 8th grade, there were 11 of us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to Grand Rapids High School, and then I went to the University of Michigan.
What year did you graduate from high school?
Let's see, it was kind of mixed up because I graduated in 3 years, and then I graduated from the University of Michigan in 1925.
Mm-hmm.
I know that. You
What'd
know
you
that was
stu-
61 years ago?
Yeah. What did you study there at Michigan?
Chemistry.
Chemistry?
Yeah.
Hmm. Was that unusual for a woman at that time to go into chemistry?
I didn't think it was.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was, but it never occurred to me that it was unusual.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had always, my parents said that there was no such word as can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I believed them.
Mm-hmm.
I just liked about 2 math courses of getting a chemical engineering degree because my husband was a chemical engineer. We were next door neighbors and went through school together. And of course I took the same courses he did. I don't think I ever went into a classroom when I was young. Our names weren't, our initials weren't on the board. KH and MJ.
What degree? You got a degree in chemistry?
Chemistry,
Okay. What was college life like in the 1920s? The roaring 20s?
I was too busy and I was very young
Mm-hmm.
because you see, I was only 20 when I got out. And I don't think I dated a lot. You know, and I lived in a dormitory. They called it alumni house. It was a dormitory that you had to be recommended by a teacher. And you had to have had all A's in order to get into it. And but there were only 17 girls in this dormitory.
Hmm.
And I
Did
had
you-
the reputation for never studying. But they didn't know that I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I studied before anybody got up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't have to do anything.
Yeah.
They never caught me studying.
Hmm.
That's the best time.
That's right.
Nobody bothers you.
Mm-hmm. Did you bob your hair in the 20s?
When I was 19, I cut my hair. And some of the girls cried when I cut my hair. And I have a picture.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Did you wear the short dresses?
Well,
The
they
flap?
didn't wear them that short then.
Yeah.
They were these straight. Of course I wore them.
Were there many flappers at Michigan?
I didn't even think about it. I suppose there were.
What is a flapper?
Well, we always thought of them as rather wild.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them marcelled their hair. I didn't.
You didn't.
No, I couldn't fool with this.
How'd you fix your hair?
Just combed it.
Now, you met your father at the sauerkraut. I mean, your husband at the sauerkraut.
Well, he was my next door neighbor.
Yeah. Okay.
Adjoining farm.
When did you get married?
1927, July 5th. Here in Bartlesville.
Here in Bartlesville.
Mhm.
How long did you live in Michigan altogether?
Well, 21 years.
And why did you move down here?
Well, see, first I taught school in Comstock Park for 1 year after I graduated. Had to because my aunt was bedridden and I had to stay home.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went down to Florida and taught for a year at Coral Gables, Ponce de Leon High School. And Carl went to Utah when he got out and worked in an ozokerite mine as a chemical engineer. And somebody turned over an electric stove and burnt the mine up, so he was out of a job. And he came to work for Phillips. And when I got through the year teaching in Florida, I came up here and we got married.
Your husband was an engineer for Phillips?
And he was, yeah.
What was your impression of Bartlesville when you first saw it?
I can remember coming into Bartlesville, and I had taken the train down from St. Louis. And that was 1927, was the year after they built the Phillips Tower. It was built 1926. Well, I stopped at the Mayor Hotel, and it became the Burlingame, and then now it's something else. I went across to the Phillips building and called Carl. He was out at Burbank, 55 miles. And he just bought a Model T sports roadster. And I said, here I am. You know. And it took him an hour and a half to get here. And when he came, I said, thank goodness it took you a long time. 55, miles, an hour and a half. Well, I think we walked around the courthouse about 3 times before we went in to get our marriage license. And then we went down to the Justice of the Peace, who was over the Terry jewelry store. And the town marshal was our witness.
Who was that? What was his name?
I don't remember, but it's on the license if I ever find it. And we went back to the hotel, and of course he went up. He said, "We just got married. We want the same room she had." You can imagine what. So then the next day we drove back, and how he ever got there in an hour and a half, I don't know. Because that road was nothing but potholes, and it was terrible road.
Was it paved then at that time?
No, it wasn't paved. It was awful.
Is that Highway 60? Was Highway 60 now?
Yeah, it was. So I guess it was Highway 60. It was, and with that Model T Ford must have just hit the tops of the bumps on the way. But anyway, we moved into we stayed in Scheidler in 2 rooms and a lean-to for the first 3 months we were married. And then we got a company house.
Now, was Scheidler a boomtown?
Oh, I guess you'd call it that. All of them were pretty terrible.
Now, you say you lived in a company house.
Yeah.
Now,
Phillips
what
company house.
would you describe
4
a company
rooms,
house?
4 rooms and a bath. And we paid $16 a month rent. And some of them had a little porch enclosed on the back. Subsequently, we had one of those. But it was the $4 a room for rent. And of course, I think every young married couple should live in a company camp. If they can stand that, they're good for the rest of the time. Because, well, you meet all kinds of people.
What was life like in a company camp?
Well, the first camp we were in, there were only 4 houses. And you got to know your neighbors fairly well. We were out there for 5 years that time, and my oldest daughter was born there. And she was born in a 2-bedroom hospital over the drugstore. And, let's see, July. I have to get this straight. 27th, 1928. She made the mistake one time when our 25th wedding anniversary of reversing that. And, it wasn't
Mhm.
right. Well, the second time we went out there in 1936, then my son was born then. I lived in a bigger camp in the middle. So you had to be very neutral, because the people from one end of the camp would come and say something bad about the ones at the other end of the camp. And you didn't dare say anything. It was rather touchy.
How large was that camp?
It had about 20 houses.
Mm-hmm.
It was number 2 camp, right by the big compressor. And that shook you all the time. When I first moved into that camp, I didn't think I was ever going to sleep. And after 2 years, when I went into someplace else, I couldn't sleep because it would vibrate.
Mm-hmm. What were the main jobs the men did in the oil fields at that time?
Of course, my husband was head of the laboratory, Phillips research lab, and he was a pioneer in fractionation. He was very good. He was a brilliant man. When we were kids in school, I always got just a little bit better grades than he did. If I got 98, he got 97. And his father would say every month, "Carl, if you beat her this time, I'll give you $1. Now, $1 back then was big money.
That's right.
And he said, "Yeah, I know I can," but she'd cry. So that's love, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So,
How long did you live in the camps?
well, 5 years the first time and 2 years the second time.
Mm-hmm.
In between, we came to Bartlesville.
Of course, I've heard the stories of, like Seminole, that was just was really a boom town, and you had all types of people there, and it was
there
a big.
were all types of people. In any oil field
Mm-hmm.
area, you have all kinds of people. You would see a shack that really was terrible. Go in and there'd be a grand piano in it.
Hmm.
So you never knew.
Mm-hmm.
And don't ever think that women aren't the most vicious sex. If you ever see 2 women fighting over a clothesline or something, you haven't seen anything.
Were there many fights like that?
Oh, yeah. They are the deadliest.
What was the reason for the fights mainly?
Oh, it could be anything or nothing.
Speaking of clothesline, tell me about doing laundry in a camp town.
Oh, out there in the oil field, you hung up your diapers, and by the time you got to the end of the line, you took them down because the wind blew so hard all the time.
You have a washing machine, you have to do it by hand.
Oh, I did it by hand. I didn't get a washing machine for 6 or 7 years, I guess. And then it was just a little one.
Mm-hmm. Did the town of Burbank spring up because of the oil field?
Burbank, there wasn't much of anything to it. It was called the Burbank Field.
Mm-hmm.
Burbank itself didn't amount to anything. Whizbang was a wide open town, and there were some funny things.
Did you ever go to Whizbang?
Oh yeah, sure. You went. You just went through it.
Yeah. Describe Whizbang. What the town look
Well,
like?
it was just a place in the road, but it had wide open things, gambling and that sort of thing.
Have saloons?
Oh, remember, no, it was prohibition.
Oh, that's right, that's right. But I'm sure they had.
Oh yeah, well, I made the best home brew in the oil field.
You did.
Yeah.
What's your recipe?
Oh, I could tell you, but no, I needed tonic or something. The doctor told me, he said, I can give you a tonic, but he said, the best thing you can do is to make a good home brew, 5-gallon bottle, and put lots of malt in it, and yeast, of course. And he says, drink a glass of that before every meal. Oh, that's hard to take before breakfast. And I did, and I gained 5 pounds a month on it, and my health improved greatly. But I had lots of help drinking that stuff. You can get 72 bottles out of a 5-gallon bottle of home brew.
So it
And it
consists
was
of
good. It was really good. I was careful
yeah.
about how I made
What type of bottles did you use?
regular water bottles,
Mhm.
these 5-gallon water bottles.
Yeah.
Set it in the bathroom so it'd be warm.
So it consists of water, malt, yeast,
Yeast and sugar.
and sugar.
Yeah,
And what type of bottle did you pid it in after it?
Well, regular beer bottles.
Beer bottle?
As I say, you can get 72 of them out of a 5
Did the police ever come out there to raid any of
Oh,
those
no.
gambling places, or?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
The, we were a little bit different people. My husband, and because he was so young, why, he thought if he grew a beard and mustache and a goatee, he'd look older. So he did, and a beautiful one. and I, when I went to saw my contract for the school in Florida, and on the last thing on it was that you are not allowed to cut your hair. And I thought, that's not for me, not in Florida. So I cut my hair, and I mean, I really cut it so that it was like a man's. And of course they couldn't say anything after I got there. But I went every 2 weeks to a barber. He was deaf and dumb. And I wrote down what I wanted. And every 2 weeks he trimmed my hair.
Now this is in Florida?
And so when I came here, I had that short hair. Well, people looked at us a little askance, you know. One day I was down there in Shiloh and just standing, waiting for my husband to go around to the post office and get the mail. And when there was a man standing by me, and he said, "You see that fellow coming around the corner there with the beard?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "You know, they say he's the smartest man in this part of the country." And I said, "Gee, he doesn't look it, does he?"
Now, why'd you go to Florida?
My mother was there, my natural mother. My aunt died. And my mother came up and took care of her in the last few months that she was alive. And so I went back down to Florida with her. I got this job at teaching.
And how long were you down there?
Just a year.
Just a year. And what part of Florida was that?
Coral Gables. Outside, about 7 miles outside of Coral Gables. I was in the 1926 hurricane.
Tell me about that.
Oh, that was something else. We lived in what was really intended to be a garage. We're living in it while we were going to build a house. And my stepfather was a mason, and he built it and reinforced it with steel, and it really did a good job. Well, this happened on Friday night. And that day, for some reason, when I came home from school, I thought, oh, I would just love to have an Irish stew. But I didn't know anything about what went into an Irish stew except a lot of stuff. And so I stopped at the grocery store and I loaded up 2 big sacks full, big piece of meat and a lot of vegetables and stuff. And when I came in, my mother said, "What in the world have you got?" And I said, "Well, I know you didn't have anything in the house because we always shopped on Saturday. No ice, no refrigerators then. We had Did depend on an ice box, and no electricity out there too. It was a development. And she said, "That's enough to feed an army." And I said, "Well, I wanted some Irish stew." We fed 52 people. They came all night long. We put kerosene lamps in the windows. And when their houses blew away, they tied their children together with sheets and made their way to our house. And but by morning we had 52 people in there, and we had enough to feed them. Soup. And by 4 o'clock that afternoon, they sent a big bus out from Miami to pick them up. But it was an experience.
How bad was that hurricane? How
It was
big
one of the
it?
worst they ever had.
Mhm.
They didn't publicize it very much because of the wasn't good for Florida. But there were a lot of deaths. We went down into Miami, and the caskets were piled up, you know, where they picked them up out of ditches and everything. Our house was draped with everything you could think of that had blown to it. And there was a sewing machine in the yard. And my stepfather was quite handy, and he fixed it up. So it was a really good sewing machine. And one day I was sewing curtains on it. And I told my mother, I said, "My goodness, if I just had a hammer, I could do this so much faster." And my little brother came in, he says, "What's this thing?" It was a hammer. So, strange things happen. Well, I remember a fellow sitting there when we were waiting to see whether the house was going to blow away.
Yeah.
You could see the houses just rolling past, and the roof would heave, just breathe during it. And this fellow sat back there, and he says, "You know, I feel just as safe here as if I were in Jesus Christ's best pocket." It's an odd expression, but that's the way they felt. And of course, we doled out children to, if in case the thing did go, they were to take 2 children and go to the nearest palm tree and say so the wind would push them against it. The palm trees do, or the palmettos do survive these hurricanes. And I looked out, and I said to Mother, "There goes our kerosene can," and it was just bobbing off down across the field, and I said, "That's the last we'll see of that." About 7 hours later, it came back. You know, the hurricanes do go in a flat pattern.
Now your house is made of reinforced
Concrete blocks.
So
But it survived.
And you fed 52 people with your
52 people
Irish
with
stew
my
fixing.
Irish stew. It was really harrowing. And that isn't the first, well, that's the first hurricane I was in. I've been in one on the Pacific Ocean. It was just about as bad.
So you stayed in Florida 2 years,
Just 1 year.
just 1 year. How long did it take to recover from that hurricane, the town?
It didn't seem to take very long, really. People do recover very quickly. Of course, nowadays they have warning, but we didn't have any warning. It just hit. All of a sudden, our windows just flew open. And at 11 o'clock at night,
How long did the hurricane last?
14 hours.
14 hours.
7 hours one direction, and then a lull, and then 7 hours in the other direction.
How fast was the wind go? Any idea?
A little over 100 miles.
Okay. And so from Florida, did you come to Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Do you remember World War One?
Oh, sure. Of course. I was in high school.
Was there any organized effort in Michigan to support the war effort?
Oh, yes. The thing about it was a, what you'd call a popular war. There were songs written about it. And people sang them. And that makes all the difference. You see. And propaganda was very, very rife. They told how terrible these Germans were. and Carl's father suffered from that because he was German, but his father had come here. But the name was not popular.
How did he suffer? What happened?
Well, just the people saying things, and he was a proud man. In fact, when his father came here from Germany, he refused to speak German. The family had to speak English. Said we were here in this country, and this is the way it should be.
Now, was he from Germany?
Oh yes.
What did you do in
He
arms?
was his father was champion glassblower of the world. He was the great bear of Germany. He drank his beer out of a keg.
What was his name?
It was Carl Christian Hackmuth.
And what part of Germany did he live in?
It was Württemberg. But,
What did you do in Armistice Day? The day the war ended?
I can remember I was coming home from school, and I had a really bad time trying to get home because we rode streetcars. I had to ride a streetcar out there, and they kept pulling the trolley off and stopping the streetcar and celebrating. It was, I thought I would never get home.
How long did that celebration last?
Oh, a couple of days. That's all.
Now, was that there at Comstock Cove?
Well, at Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
See, I was going to high school then.
Did many boys from Grand Rapids go to the war?
Oh, I'm sure they did. I wasn't aware of how many, but of course there were lots of them.
The flu epidemic.
Ooh, my husband's sister died in that in 1918, and it was very bad. It was bad here in Bartlesville, from what I hear. That they were hard put to find places to put the people.
How many died up in Michigan where you were from?
I would have no idea, but I knew I knew that she did, and that was close to home.
Any idea where did the flu come from?
Food.
The flu.
Food. Oh, I don't. They didn't know then.
How did the Depression affect you and your family? 1930s.
It didn't affect us personally very much. My husband's salary was never cut, and but he was hiring PhDs that were begging for jobs for $75 a month. And they were glad to get it. He was getting $200 then, and that was a big salary, you know.
So, in general, did Bartlesville survive the Depression okay? And
They seem to. They always have.
where were you living in those days? What part
Well,
of town?
you see, I lived out in the oil field till 32. The dust storm was the worst. That was horrible.
Tell me about that.
Oh, the oil derricks were government placed 1/8 of a mile apart, both directions. 12 miles one way, 6 miles the other in that Burbank field. And you could not see that far because the dust was so thick. And when I washed dishes, I put them in the cabinet upside down. And when I set the table, I put the plates upside down. Because if you didn't, the dust would be on before your food was. It was bad. And years later, my oldest daughter, when she was in college, and they took x-rays, and they'd say she had been exposed to TB because of the scars on her lungs. And finally, here in Bartlesville, Dr. Norris did the usual x-ray, and he says, oh, a dust bowl. It's typical dust bowl scars.
Yeah. Is that what they call dust pneumonia?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But she had, of course, she was about 7. And then
How did you keep the dust out of the house? Or did you?
it piled up under the windowsills. Of course, the windows were not very tight, but you could not keep it out of the house. And you grated under your feet. It made a difference how much you sweat.
There was, the big dust storm was April 14th, 1935.
Was it?
They called Black Sunday.
Yeah.
And that was mainly out in the Panhandle, in that
Yeah,
area.
we were there. See, my son was born in 36, and we were there in 35.
Was that storm bad in this area?
Oh, it was, I don't know about here.
Yeah.
It was out in the oil field. It was bad.
No, you were in Scheidler at that time?
Webb City. It was.
Webb City?
But then camp number 2.
Okay.
But you just you could hardly breathe. I mean, it was bad.
World War II.
My youngest daughter was born on Pearl Harbor Day. But then my husband built the Capitol plant, the gasoline plant, designed, and he spent most of his time there. And they were criticized a good deal for this. It was aviation gasoline, because of selling it to Japan. But you know, that was the best thing, because when the war was on, their source was dried up that they had depended on.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a bad thing to.
Where was that plant? Where was that?
It was down by Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City.
Then in 43, I went to work in the analytical lab. And of course it was because all the men were gone, and women had to work. And it was vacation for me.
What'd you do in the lab? What kind of work?
Oh, I did everything there was to do in the lab. I would learn how, and then I would teach whoever came in. The boss wasn't used to working with women. It was unusual. And but I was an old friend, and he said, "You take care of these young college students and so forth who were coming in." And so I learned to use everything, sulfurs to tetraethyl leads, and analyzing gasoline, pod columns, and all that sort of thing.
So your main duties were analysis of different...
Analysis of gasoline and gases, that is the hydrocarbons. And it was very interesting. It was a vacation.
How long did that job last?
Oh, just the summer, really. Because I had 6 children. I was still nursing my baby. And it was...
Where was the research center then?
Down right across from the transportation center, that building that has the glass brick. That was the first building that had glass brick in it.
Where's that located?
Well, you know where the transportation center is?
Transportation center.
Where Jennings, just down north of the post office.
Okay.
There's a red brick building there.
Okay. That was the research center.
That was the research.
Okay. When did they move it out in Osage County? When did?
Well, that was this was after it was out in Osage County.
Oh, okay.
Oh, well, here you mean?
Yeah, just.
Here. Gee, I don't know when that was moved. Let's see. My husband died in 1966. Gosh, 20 years ago. I don't remember. You could find that out easier
Yeah.
than I can.
Was there a big celebration there when the war ended, World War II?
I don't even remember. No, I suppose it was, of course.
My next question.
That was another fairly popular war.
Yeah. Was there any work to support the war effort in Bartlesville, like the bond drives or?
Yeah, we had the usual things, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was too busy to.
With 6 kids.
Yeah, 6 kids and.
Mm-hmm. When did you first become interested in the edible wild foods
I've
and the
always
medicines?
been interested because my minor was botany, and I've always been interested in plants. And I think I read Yule Gibbons, and I thought, well, that's a good idea. And I corresponded with him. And they called me the Yule Gibbons of Osage County. But,
how many plants, I guess, are edible and that you make medicines out of? I'm not sure how to phrase that question.
oh, goodness.
Or is that a fair
there's
question?
A lot of them. I think you saw that article, and I had a list down the side there, and that was just only a fraction of them, really.
How many plants you have right around here?
Oh, all of those are right around here. Right here in this canyon.
Do you make any medicines now from your plants?
No, the only thing I really, I don't know what you call it, medicine, but there's a plant called Mexican tea that it's a weed. You know what lamb's quarters is? It's close relative. Lamb's quarters is Chenopodium alba. This is Chenopodium ambrosioides. And the Mexicans use it, and I use it.
What is
to fix
it?
beans so they're not gassy.
Huh. You just cook it with the beans,
Yeah.
or
1 leaf
one leaf?
with a pot of beans. It works. Of course, the Mexicans use it as a tea for health reasons. They give it to their children because it's a vermifuge. I mean, for worms. And you can recognize it if you once smell it. You will never forget it. So that when you pull it,
What
put it
type
on
of
your
smell does it
hands.
have?
It smells like a swamp, I guess. It's the only best. But it's unmistakable. They call it, the Mexicans call it epazoda.
Could you just?
You can buy it in the Mexican food stores.
Oh, you can.
Uh-huh.
What are some of the plants that are used for medicines? Just
Well, there's purple coneflower, or black Samson. It was used for streptococcus infection until they had penicillin. And it was the only thing that would touch it.
it was effective against
Oh,
it.
yes, and the pharmaceutical companies are paying 50 cents a pound for the roots to do some experimental work on it. After all, if it worked, you shouldn't discard it.
How did you prepare it? What would
Oh, they make an extract of it.
an extract?
And at the turn of the century, the doctors came out and dug their own roots and made it. Also, if you have a toothache, just take a piece of the root and hold it between your teeth and it'll stop it. Of course, it tastes so bad, I guess you forget about toothache.
Of course, it's Mr. Nero showed me the pleurisy root.
Yeah,
That
the butterfly weed.
Butterfly weed. And he said they make a tea out of that.
Yeah. Most of the things they make tea and drink it. Now there's one little plant that grows down here by the mailbox, usually early in the spring, beautiful flower, that southwestern Indians used for oral contraception hundreds of years ago. And it works. And they make a tea, drink a little bit every day. Same as a pill. Haven't you often wondered why there's only 2 kids to a teepee?
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't you wonder how they ever found out?
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the other plants that are used as medicines?
Well, mullein,
Mm-hmm.
they used to use that. They smoked it for asthma, and apparently it was effective. And there's other things they use it for too. And it's a distinctive plant, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then, well, it isn't for medicine, but if you were stranded somewhere and by a stream, and there were fish in it, but you didn't have anything to fish with, the root of the false indigo can be crushed and just waved in the water, and it'll anesthetize the fish. They'll come up to the surface, and you can pick them up before they recover. Illegal, perhaps, but
Mm-hmm.
but a survival thing. Nice thing about the plant is that you can find it in the wintertime because it turns black.
Of course, the plant I'm most familiar with is poke salad.
Oh, well, yeah.
Of course, everybody knows poke
Yeah.
salad.
And so many people, you know, arthritis will try anything. If somebody says this will do, and they even say that poke seed is good for it. Of course, it's poison.
Yeah.
The seeds are poisonous. The juice of the berries is not, but the seeds are poisonous. And I don't know, because most medicines are poisonous if they're not used discreetly.
That's right.
That's right.
I interviewed a Dave Canottoby, who's a Choctaw Indian,
Mhm.
and he makes a arthritis medicine, and it works.
Never sure.
And because I gave it to a lady in Oklahoma City who had arthritis really bad, and it stopped the
Just
pain.
stopped it. Mhm.
It won't affect the rheumatoid arthritis.
Oh, well, no,
Yeah,
almost
yeah,
nothing does,
right.
you know.
But,
But the ordinary
Yeah,
osteo.
but stop the pain and everything.
Mhm. I have it, of course, but it doesn't, I don't let it bother me.
Mm-hmm.
There's another plant, the autumn crocus, colchicum, that has been used for gout for 2,000 years, and they still use it. Colchicine, people that have gout take cold Benamide. The cold part is colchicum from this
Okay.
autumn crocus.
Could we walk around
Yeah,
a little
sure,
bit? And
sure.
Let me